Good morning, Rotarians and guests. Welcome. I'm the president of Minneapolis City of Lakes Rotary Club and your host for today. So please join me in the four-way test. This is something that Rotarians do. If you want to stand or sit, you can stand. Cindy stood, so we got to stand. Of the things we think, say, and do, first is the truth. Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? All right, you can sit down now. So I just wanted to do a quick introduction. We have some dignitaries from the district, as well as some club presidents here. District Governor from 5960, Dale Quigley is here. Assistant Governor from 5950, Fred Heron is online. Roseville Rotary President Maggie Mao is here in the back. And then St. Paul Rotary President David Dominic is also here. So we're going to get started right away. Yes, welcome. Thank you. And it's my pleasure today to introduce our day chair, our sunrise chair, Carol Russell. Carol is the CEO of Russell Herder, an advertising agency located in Minneapolis. She is a longtime Rotarian. She joined Minneapolis City of Lakes Club in 2012 and is a past president of the City of Lakes. She's also a mentor to me, and one of the reasons why I'm a president, she asked me. She's a force in our club, no doubt, and has been dedicated to the success of the annual Sunrise Forum for many, many years. So please welcome Carol Russell.
Thank you. He also doesn't follow directions. I said, you don't have to introduce me. Well, on behalf of Minneapolis City of Lakes, the Rotary Clubs of Roseville and St. Paul, welcome. We are very, very excited to have everybody here. And we have a big group online too. I think we have probably over 140 people that are participating somehow. So we're very excited about that. This is an important topic, as you all know, and that's why I think you're here. And what we're going to listen to are a lot of different viewpoints on that and have some important discussion. First of all, I want to thank the planning committee. I won't read off everybody's names. They're in the program, but this is a year-long event trying to work up to this, and they put in a lot of hours, and I really appreciate that. And I also want to recognize Ellen Lupker, if you could just stand up. Ellen is a founder of the forum and has done this for 17 years. We really owe her a lot. Okay. All right. There's a few things. You will have the opportunity to ask questions after the speakers talk. And the thing to do is, if you're in the room, there's cards at your seats. You can jot a note during the presentations, pass them to the outside, your right or left, whatever. And they'll get picked up and brought up here, and we'll sort through them and answer as many as we can. And if you're online, we have the chat feature, so you'll be able to use that as well. So with that, I want to introduce our moderator. Very excited to have Nina Moyne, senior reporter and host at NPR News. NPR has served as a moderator many times for the forum, and it really is central to what we do. Nina covers race and immigration for radio and digital news, also serving as a newscaster and a host for talk shows and such podcasts as In Front of Our Eyes, which covered the killing of George Floyd and subsequent murder trial. She was a diversity fellow at the Hubbard School of Journalism and Mass Communication, University of Minnesota, and among other past positions was a news reporter at CCO, where she reported on daily news as well as provided live reports for CBS This Morning and other affiliates. She holds degrees in broadcast journalism and political science from the University of Missouri, Columbia. And with that, I will welcome you.
Oh, my life story with microphones. Well, hello, everybody. I'm super, super honored to be here to help facilitate this important conversation. And we're entitling this conversation today, "This is Our Crisis, Kids, Schools, and Mental Health." And this is, of course, presented by the Rotary Clubs of Minneapolis, City of Lakes, St. Paul, and Roseville. So thank you all for coming out this morning. This is the 17th Rotary Sunrise Forum, and we're joined by, again, an in-person and a virtual audience from across the region, really. Some of the goals this morning, and these are important, are to bring together a greater community discussion and address this really urgent situation and to understand the different perspectives and hear from subject experts that are here with us today, highlighting both mental health in general and in the schools, and to highlight really the mission of the Rotary as a service organization that's grounded on principles of ethical decision-making. So as mentioned, our panelists include Ann Garrity, who is a mental health clinician at the University of Minnesota and a faculty member, Brandon Jones, who serves as executive director for the Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health, and Damian Smith, who is lead school psychologist and president of the Minnesota School Psychologists Association. Thank you so much for being here. These compassionate experts are going to help us understand this crisis in children's mental health and how we can help them cope, as well as some possible solutions. We also welcome your participation again through your questions. So after this, each panelist is going to be talking for about 15 minutes to give an overview of their thoughts. And then people will be going along and collecting your questions. So feel free to begin writing them as you're listening to those presentations. And after that, we'll get to your questions. So without further ado, let's start with Ann Garrity. Am I
on? Good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I have two. Closer. Better? Okay. I have too much to say, so I decided to do some notes, and I hope you'll forgive my looking down. Still not working. Hello? Really close. Okay. So we're going to talk today about the crisis of mental health. And it felt very real to me this weekend when I attended the funeral of a 16-year-old young man who suicided. And we know that this is a huge problem in our community. We also know that when we talk about children and mental health, we use the model of a three-legged stool. We're always thinking about children in their families, children in their school, and how the mental health community can support children in their growing and learning. I'm going to start with children in their families. Why is this happening? Mental health, like physical health, is what we all strive for, right? We use the word mental health, and that's important to emphasize mental health because we're going to talk about mental distress as the opposite. Sometimes we have periods of mental distress, feeling unwell, feeling off balance. Getting our balance back is the goal. For children, off balance can happen frequently because of development. So development is actually described as back and forth learning, and to function in an increasingly complex world with increasingly complex tasks and skills. So the whole period of childhood and adolescence is about being off balance and then getting your balance back. And that can be distressful. Mental distress can be caused by three different forces and intermixing of three. One is biological. For some children, there are biological phenomena that contribute to their being off balance. Something in their brain and body keeps them off balance. The second is stress and trauma. Stress and trauma come from the outside, but again, they destabilize children in the inside. And the third is relational difficulties. And relational difficulties is really important because children so depend on the adults in their lives to support them as they find their ways. We have had 3 pandemics, and I'm going to talk about these 3 crises that I think children and teenagers have been experiencing. The first is the crisis of social media. We know that significant changes in mental health statistics occurred before COVID. Many of the articles that you're reading about the crisis in mental health have statistics that preceded the COVID event. After relative stability in the mid-1920s, we saw significant increases in internalizing symptoms, anxiety and depression, an increase in teen suicide. As concerning, distress seemed to be among younger and younger children. While it is even easy to blame those darn phones, research suggests it is not the device. This is an evolutionary phenomena, and we are all now attached to our phones. Kids with phones use them as we do to stay connected, especially with strong parental guidance. More critical has been the impact of social media and the cyberbullying, gaslighting, ghosting, simping, etc. that goes on. All the worst of immature social behaviors now magnified by unregulated access. Social media descended on kids who were the target, but were unprepared to negotiate many of its challenges, as were their parents, since the platforms were evolving faster than adults could keep up. This was such an interesting phenomenon. Those of you who are parenting know it. Parents would manage Snapchat, and then there would be another platform and another platform. So this really targeted teens and children in a way that I think their parents weren't prepared to manage. That's the first crisis. And certainly there's a lot written about how social media has changed our communication styles and patterns. The second crisis is the crisis of COVID. COVID arrived and no one was prepared. So interesting, March 13th came, and I remember leaving my office and think, well, I can be home for a couple of weeks. Remember that? Couple of weeks. It was unprecedented, and at first many managed. Remember the run on puzzles and board games? Remember that early spring where families were being together and everyone was talking about how wonderful it was not to be driving kids every place. It really was kind of a unique time. The most significant impact of COVID, second to the abject fear that everyone felt as we contemplated a virus that could kill us, was lost learning. Schools shut down and students and teachers pivoted to online learning. Zoom to the rescue. To be fair, this worked, sort of. And it did, it was phenomenal. Because all of a sudden we couldn't leave, and we had these platforms that could actually look like they were keeping us connected to learning, keeping kids connected to learning. For some students, online proved manageable and they returned to the stimulation of school with relief. For others, online meant serious loss of learning and mastery. They fell behind and they felt behind. They got discouraged and returned to school feeling defeated. And I'm sure Damien is going to address this more. For others, online may have actually offered a respite from the social demands of school, and returning was very hard. Many of these students have yet to return. They remain alienated and educationally lost and disenfranchised. The number of children, one statistic I read, who dropped out of school went from 8 million to 16 million. For students with special needs, the loss of learning was magnified by the absence of support they needed for learning. So we had a whole generation of young children and teens who had a massive disruption in this experience. COVID disrupted not only learning, but normal social experiences, usually mediated by attentive adults that are part of the developmental process. And this isolation exacerbated the impacts of social media. So instead of seeing children, peers every day at school, they were seeing them online. And that just intensified the negative dimensions of social media, as well as the positive dimensions. I knew one student who came to me and was very distressed because his classmates got in trouble for using Google Meet when they were back at school. And he said to me with real pathos, but we were supposed to use Google Meet. That was the platform they used when they were online. So there's a lot of positives to social media, but the negatives really got exacerbated. Okay, now let me talk about the third crisis. I'm going to call it the crisis of fear and anxiety. The newest research that we have on fear and anxiety is that it's a very primal and biological set of feelings. Fear and anxiety may not be described as a feeling or an emotion as well as a sensation. Fear is a response to immediate danger. Anxiety is a response to remembered or anticipated danger, right? So they're cousins and they're essential for our survival, but when they become out of balance, they become very detrimental. COVID invited a very specific fear, right? And this is important because I'm still hearing children talk about what if it comes back and we die? So that became a really big issue. But fear and increasing anxiety has been creeping into childhood for some time. When I was a kid, there was somewhat imposing social rules. Children should be seen and not heard, etc. But a lot of freedom to explore, to be out in the world without supervision. Family norms have shifted significantly. We now describe parenting as helicoptering or snow plowing, hovering and removing obstacles. I heard an educational leader recently say that he wouldn't allow his kids to go to the park, quote, because we all know what happens there. What happens there? It used to be that kids learned to explore, to problem solve, to figure out strategies for doing brave and sometimes reckless activities. It used to be that children would use their free time to practice how to be. Now parents are distraught with fear of the dangers their children face. Some are imagined dangers, born from a misguided desire to make everything easy for my child, to avoid any hardship. The model of childhood seems to be to keep everything safe and easy. Now parents are distraught with the fear of dangers their children face. Some are imagined dangers born from a misguided desire to make everything easy to avoid any hardship. But there are also real dangers. Parents are reacting to random gun violence, to real fears about community safety. And as importantly, children are unpracticed. They have lost many of the skills we used to negotiate the world. Even before COVID, the emphasis is on adult guided activity rather than child guided activity. So children go from soccer practice to karate practice to tutoring. These are all adult directed activities. And the freedom to explore and figure it out yourself has really been diminished. What does this mean? In terms of children's mental health, for me, it means that our crisis of mental health is real, right? This is not an exaggerated description. It is real. Feeling anxious all the time is a miserable way to operate in the world. And it is a family crisis as much as a child crisis. Families are struggling to know how to help their children manage adversity. There have been an overemphasis on fixing things for children. This diminishes parents' focus on helping their children manage to learn, manage to build skills that allow them to feel confident and competent. Without confidence and competence, children are more vulnerable to anxiety and then to depression. Depression descriptively is I can't do it or it won't work, right? Anxiety says, oh. So the phenomena of moving from anxiety to depression is very accessible when we think that children don't have the balancing competence and confidence to say, maybe I do, maybe I can figure this out. Parents are looking for help, for someone outside to fix things. Brandon will describe our crisis of mental health resources. We don't have enough therapists to do the job. I'm going to suggest we may not need more therapists, but we do need more support for families so that they can do their job. It isn't about fixing, but supporting children and teens so they manage their world experiences. Their experiences will be different than ours. It is their work to own, and we need to help them. When parents are very anxious, their kids will absorb this and carry that anxiety into their experiences. When parents can feel confident and brave. So I'm going to invite all of you who are as old as I to remember the first time you let your child drive away in a car. Right? The most brave act imaginable. Remember? When parents feel confident and brave, then children will be better able to talk about their fears and insecurities and learn to manage. That's the thing. So one last thought. I use the word talk. And talk is very important. What we know about our neurobiology is that our right brain processes feelings and sensations, and our left side of the brain moves to thoughts and logic. So when we can move to talk in early childhood, we call it name it and tame it. When we can move to words, we develop some mastery. Stories. Stories are the tools that we humans use to build mastery. Often our stories are tall tales, exaggerated accounts of how we did it. We really build up those stories. These serve to build our confidence, but most importantly, stories allow pleasure to overcome fear. So if I have a fearful event and I can tell the story of mastery, each time I get braver and the fear gets smaller. And I have a sense that the pleasure of my mastery was bigger than the moment of not being sure. We are bereft of stories now. As Brandon knows, many of the webinars that we did through COVID urged schools to develop oral history projects, to be able to talk about what it was like for children and teachers together. We didn't do that. We seem to have learned little from our experiences. Our narratives are incoherent. Masking helped, masking made it worse. Vaccines saved us or not. Guns are dangerous. Children should be able to have guns. We got through this together. Our community is profoundly divided on most ideas. How can children not feel anxious and depressed when there is so much insecurity embedded in their daily lives? So the most important question today is, what can we do to support them so they can be healthy? What can we do as a community, not just as a mental health system, but as a community, to rebuild an environment where our children can thrive? Thanks.
Thank you so much. Oh, Maya. Oh. Sorry. Hear me? Hear me? No.
Nope.
Oh, hello? Hello? No? Okay. Okay. Well, all I'm really going to do is ask Davey to go ahead. So go ahead. We'll figure this out.
All right. Yeah, that's me. I'm working.
You're good.
So my friend Ann here just took all my little talking points. So, so I'm going to go pretty much off the top of my head, but things that I've been thinking about most of my career, but, you know, largely the last 2.5, 3 years. Raise your hand if you were ever bullied in school. Raise your hand even if you weren't bullied. Raise your hand if you ever walked around school feeling anxious or depressed. So cast yourself back to being in school, being in junior high, being in high school. It's a longer journey for some of us. And some of us, remember high school and junior high as the great times. I do not, but some of us believe that. And we still had mental health crises back then. We still had suicide back then. We still had homicide back then in schools. Now come to today, where you have bullying, just like we did back then. But remember back then, when you had a bully, when you went home, the bully wasn't still there. With social media, the bully follows you home. I mean, and think about all the anxiety that goes on. With COVID, I think we did a lot for our students. We did the best we could. We developed these platforms where we could do online learning en masse for all of our students. And that was amazing, apart from the fact that I think that means we don't get snow days anymore, and I don't like it. But with that, it's another place where we can't escape. That anxiety that you feel walking through the halls now is at your kitchen table or at your desk in your room. COVID itself was, I remember how afraid I was. Like, I didn't want to go outside. COVID was out there, or going for a walk in my neighborhood and see another person like, oh, let me cross the street, as if they were dangerous. And I'm an adult with psychology degrees. So think about, with the developing child's minds, how that works. Everything is that much bigger. We didn't have a pandemic when we were kids. We didn't have social media when we were kids. I mean, our bullies had to actually fight us for real in real life. So think about all those things and the mental health toll that takes. And then I think about the resources we have in the schools, and we have some good resources, but we never seem to have enough. I'm a lead psychologist. I'm the one who hires psychologists. And anybody who knows me knows that Damien is always hiring. I'm always looking for more people to try to fill the need. But even at full strength, even if we were fully staffed, are we really addressing everything? Are we using our time wisely in the schools? Social emotional learning, that's very important. And I'm glad that a lot of districts are taking that on. And then there's some districts who are opposed to it for whatever political reason. And that's another aspect that I don't remember from being a child, that everything political had to be about everything. I won't drink this beer because this beer is political. I would not eat these sandwiches. These are political sandwiches. Everything. Will you wear a mask? It's political. Hey, Dad, can I get that rainbow backpack? No, political. Everything is everything. Everything is division. Everything is a fight. So how do we address it? How do we make it better? How do we change it? Because we as individuals, or even we as a city, we as a school district, we can't change all of it. We can only do what we can do. I had there's a social worker at one of the buildings I work at who did the smallest thing, and every kid is drawn to this guy. He just does the smallest thing. Because I happened to be walking by him because his office was near my office. Every kid we passed called him out by name. Hey, how you doing? Hey, Frank. Hey, Jason. Hi. And you could see that little brightening. This man makes less money than me, and he's doing more than I do, it feels like, in just that little bit. those little connections, that's what we're starting to miss. Not just with the children, but with one another. If you have two people who are on either side of the political divide, they will swear to you they have nothing in common. But then when you start talking, you realize, oh, we have just about everything in common. We disagree here, here, and here. But we've made it this contest, we've made it this fight. And we can't even just have the fight amongst adults. We push the fight into the children. We push the fight into the schools. We push the fight at the school boards. We fight the teachers. We fight the principals. We have the students going after each other for very, very petty things. So are there things that we can do in the schools to help? Yes. And I'm advocating for a lot of those things, including paying me and my friends more. But there are things that we can do that don't cost more money. It costs more attention and more intention. When we're working with one another, as adults, we should be more intentional about what we're doing, about how we're greeting each other, and how we're interacting with each other. Doing that will pass it down to the children. Trying to understand one another as opposed to trying to always be at war is the path forward. I mean, and these aren't things that they teach you at the university. These are things that are taught to you by just stepping back and paying attention and realizing that I'm not going anywhere and neither are you. So we got to work it out. We got to figure it out because my blood pressure is already too high. You know, there's no need to always be on edge, to always be fighting. The children who we really worry about and their mental health, they're watching and they're learning from us. I was just thinking about when you were saying, to just letting kids go explore, or you know what happens at the park, like usually swings and playing in the sand. I remember when I was a kid, and this wasn't too long ago, I don't think, it was the 80s. Getting on my bike with my friends and just leaving. And just making sure I got back before the street lights came on. And I remember being told, go outside. You know, that's just, that right now, it would seem like that was, oh my God, they're abandoning their children. No, get out of here. Go play. I don't want to see you for a little while. Please go. We've let go of that. We need to get back to some of that. Let kids go and play. Have real conversations and real talks with one another and our children. And even having real talks, real conversation with the staff at school. I'll tell you, as a school psychologist, the most successful children are the ones whose parents are involved. Now, I say involved, not the ones whose parents complain to me all the time. Those are different parents. The ones who are involved, the ones who, when we work out a plan and we work on an intervention to help with the child's behavior or academics, and we share that intervention with the parents, and they can continue that at home, we can have that bridge of understanding. That does a lot more for a kid than anything that I can come up with on my own, and I'm super good at it. But it's much better when everybody's a part of it. We're all working together. We are a community. Now, here in the Twin Cities, we are a very large community, but we are a community, and we have to work with one another, or we're going to fall apart. That's my part, minus all the things that Aunt Gary took from me. So,
Brandon, I hope you have some too.
I don't know if I have anything left in the tank after that, so we'll see.
Well, I hope everyone's writing their questions down too. Remember to write those down, and I have a ton, so no worries.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Jones. I'm the Executive Director of Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health. I am also a former clinician. I no longer practice clinically because I got burnt out back in 2017. Being a Black male therapist is like being a unicorn. We barely exist. So Phil, you are lucky to have two of us on this panel. Just so you all know that. Two unicorns in one place does not happen very often. Yeah, we're exactly. So, for me, this work is very personal and professional. I am a father. I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and during the pandemic, we hit the reset button, and I have a 1.5-year-old now. So when we talk about social media, I want to extend that to just technology in general. It's not just social media. My kids aren't on social media, but they know every TikTok dance because they have access to the internet. And we talk about letting our kids go outside and play. My kids don't want to go outside and play. They want to connect to whatever device they get their hands on. We have to force our kids to go outside. That's how drastic it is today. So if you're around little ones, you probably know that pain of like, let's go do something. Let's get out. And I think the pandemic, what happened during that time is it really encouraged kids to be inside and be in space and be with adults. And me and my wife, we always try to strategize to figure out ways to encourage them to go out and explore. It's okay. It's safe enough to just go outside and do something and find some trouble. Just go find some trouble outside of the home. It's okay. I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to connect some of the dots that have been shared. I want to share a little bit of things, but I don't want to get too deep. But one of the things that I think is important for us to understand is how the worldview has shifted for all of us throughout the last 3 years or so. Our worldviews have shifted. And typically when people talk about worldviews, it's from a place of religion or spirituality. And that's not necessarily the direction I'm taking. I'm taking the direction of just in general, our worldviews. Our worldview, a quick definition for worldview is your philosophy or conception of the world around you. And if we think about how our worldviews are developed, it's kind of an addition equation. We have our influencers, which typically are our biological parents or caregivers, those folks who take care of us when we're very, very young. Those are our primary influencers very early. And then we extend out from there to other caregivers, siblings, extended family members, neighbors, teachers, folks who are in our lives that show us things. They help develop our taste. They help develop our boundaries, our morals, our value systems, etc. And then we extend out and we have media. Media starts to influence. And in today's world, we have so many different ways of being influenced. We have books, movies, TV series, podcasts, radio, YouTube channels, all these different things, magazines, articles, all these different things that start to influence our worldview, how we see the world around us. So if you take those influences and you add them with your experiences, you start to develop this thing called worldview. What are our experiences? Simple. The settings that we find ourselves in and the situations that we find ourselves in as well. So the places that we go to, how we interact, etc. And what the pandemic did was it created what Anne geniusly put together and said is the cousins of fear and anxiety. That became really the two leading forces. And I'm going to add another family member to that tree and talk about the uncle of grief. One of the things that I think we've experienced during the pandemic, and some of us are still processing through this, is a state of grief. We lost a lot over the last few years. Many of us aren't aware of the things that we lost. And typically because when we think about grief, we think about death. Some of us did lose people during this time, but grief does extend beyond just the death of an individual. Here are some of the things that I have uncovered that we've lost. We've lost normal routines. We've lost access, the ability to choose, opportunities, connections. There are a lot of things that people had to reinvent, reconnect, and rediscover during this time. And that makes you feel some type of you feel that at one point in time or another. And we are trying to reconnect. Two of the younger groups that I always think about are those young people who were in the 7th and 8th grade in 2020 and those people who were juniors during that time. Because those two groups went through a transition that most of us went through very differently. They transitioned into high school and then to adult life, whether college, military, or work, in the middle of a pandemic. think about how much socialization goes in from being a 7th, 8th grader to being in the 9th grade. That is a huge jump for a lot of people. That's actually a transition period of life that we just kind of breeze over as normal people. We don't think about that transition, but that high school jump is huge for young people, especially on the emotional well-being, because you're figuring out your identity, your body's changing, you start smelling different, right? Your voice starts to feel different. You start to have acne and things, and the stuff is happening, and you're like, oh my goodness. But you don't really talk about that. You just develop through it, right? And then we have those adult activities and things that we put our kids through. So they're going through a physical, mental, emotional, and sometimes a spiritual change. And they had to do that on the internet. How do you deal with that? How do you process through that? And now we're seeing this huge increase of young people who want to talk to people. Ann teed me up because we had a pre-conversation about what we were going to talk about what are we going to do? Right now, we're in a unique position. I don't think we've ever been in this space where people want to talk to therapists. Think about this. People want to talk to us. We've never had this before. The demand is here and the supply is not. And we've known this for a long time. Us in the mental health world, we've known we have not had enough therapists for a long time. We used to just talk about it from a diversity, equity, inclusion kind of lens, though. We would say we don't have enough people of color, enough people who speak multiple languages in this space. But we knew we didn't have enough therapists then. And here came the pandemic. All the stuff we swept under the rug, the pandemic came and put that rug and just threw it right out the back door. And now we were just left with the mess to clean up. And people said, hey, the message was well-being, well-being, well-being. And everybody came and everybody got full. And now there's still wait lists to this day. So now we have a challenge that we have to meet. And it's a beautiful challenge, unfortunately, but so many people are confusing mental distress with mental health crisis. So now the demand looks even more complex, because those folks who have been in crisis for years, who have what we used to call access to diagnosis, which is more serious pristine mental illnesses, those folks really need help. And those are the folks who go to the top of the list. Mm-hmm. But then those folks who are dealing with normal distress, maybe some disconnection, maybe some high levels of anxiety, those folks feel like they have crisis needs because they haven't felt these things before, but they could probably deal with those needs in other ways. So my big idea that I want to share with you all this morning, and this gets me in trouble sometimes because these two worlds don't necessarily blend very well, is I think that there's an opportunity, given the need and given the demand of the mental health services that we know that we need. I think there's an opportunity for the mental health world and the public health world to come together in partnership and really look at how can we help everyday people increase their mental and emotional well-being. Mm-hmm. Now, the mental health people will say, we don't need public health to do that. We can do this on our own. But we know I'm on a couple of different boards of schools just here in the Twin Cities. Enrollment is down. People aren't getting master's degrees like they used to, right? So we have to extend that. And public health is going to say, absolutely, come on in. We have all these different types of professions. We can handle this problem. We've done a lot of other things, and we've done a very good job at it. So there's an opportunity for these two different fields to come together and meet the demand. Here's my example for how I think this can happen. So if you think about smoking, if there's any smokers in here, I'm not attacking you. So just know this is not an attack, because over time, smoking has become this kind of ideal of a negative thing. But in rooms like this, people used to smoke. If someone lit a cigarette in here right now, everyone would probably stop listening to us and look at that person and wonder, what in the world are you doing, right? How did we get here? Because it's only been about 20 to 25 years for us to get to that level of, what is this person doing lighting a cigarette in here? What happened? Public health and policy happened. Public health and policy happened. And at first we decided to go after what? Big tobacco, right? It was big tobacco. We're going to get you. Everybody remember those times? Yeah, we don't really hear about that much anymore, but there's still fights and stuff. We're going to go after big tobacco. So policy started to shift and change. And then we started to see smoking eliminated in places where people gather, airplanes, restaurants, public spaces like this. And then we started to see designated smoking zones. Anybody remember those things where you got your little 10 by 10 right outside the building? They'll stick you in the back somewhere where you can smoke, right? Then we started to see marketing shift. and start talking about different tobacco. But then also technology came in and we got e-cigarettes and stuff. So stuff started to shift. And then our mentality started to shift with it. And now we're in space where, again, if someone lit a cigarette in here, there might be a knockout fight going on. Like, what is going on? Because of how we now perceive our worldview has shifted around smoking. And I think we can do the same thing with mental health. If smoking was such a big crisis, and if we really care about our children, and mental health is the crisis that we stated is, we can do the same thing. And with brilliant people who, focus on young people, and with everyday people who care about children, I think that opportunity is definitely present. But how do we do it? We have to have people who care about policy, right? We have to have people who talk the language where we can put funds behind things. We have to have people with great strategy. And we have to have people who all care about young people. Because young folks, they have to have their voice in this too, right? Because at the end of the day, we can tell them all the tools that they need to maintain their well-being. And if they don't care, they're not going to go outside, right? They're not going to do it at the end of the day. So it's up to us to really focus on what do we want for the young people in our lives, and how can everyday people put in techniques, strategies, and skills to maintain their well-being. It's not rocket science. Some of the best outcomes I've ever had with my clients when I did practice clinically was just me being patient, me listening and encouraging the young person that I work with to do something, to be brave enough to do something different. And once they convince themselves of that, that's when things start to get better. Now, it doesn't always change what happens in the school building or what happens at home, but the confidence in that young person themselves change. I think we have an opportunity to do that exact same thing. So with that, I'm going to pause because they took all the talking points, and I'm going to shift back to
Yeah,
you.
no, that was great. Thank you so much. Wow. Sure, go ahead.
I just want to make one point. I think Brandon's point about smoking is so interesting, but the state of Minnesota is currently in litigation with Jute.
Yep.
Because once smoking stopped and we got e-cigarettes, they got targeted to kids.
Young people.
So
Yeah,
kids are so vulnerable.
yeah, that's important. Thank you all so much just for your work. And for your brilliant ideas. And one thing actually, Brandon, that you actually did a really good segue, because we do, one of the things that when we were planning for the event today, we really wanted to talk about was possible solutions and how to move forward with optimism and working together. We do have a lot of issues that we face as a society, and sometimes it just feels like we're just talking about the issues round and around. And so it's sort of a what needs to be done. So some of the themes that I heard were, social media, there's a supply and demand issue, there's cultural, social issues, and also understanding that you never really know what's going on in a child's home either. So
Right.
whatever might be going on at school is, going on, but you only have them for that amount of time. So maybe we'll go back down the line and start with you, Brandon, and then we'll get to some of your great questions that I have here. But are there any implementable solutions right now that would be very helpful, or what would it take?
Yeah. A lot of them are out there. People just have to figure out which ones work for them. When it comes to treatment, we'll use that term, it's very subjective. There's no ABC solution that's going to work for everyone. Mindfulness tools are great. They work very well for some people. Cognitive behavioral therapy is great. There's tons of free worksheets you can download online and really start to shift your mentality, but it doesn't work for everybody. So the first thing that I would say is you have to figure out what works for you and be very patient when you're trying different things. Because sometimes people say, all right, I'm going to try this new mental health technique. And if it doesn't work, mental health doesn't work at all, I'm not going to do it again. You have to be patient and give yourself some time to figure out what works. Talk therapy is great, but sometimes just talking to people you care about who are willing to listen also helps. So, I'm a big proponent of people taking care of their minds and their bodies to the best of their ability. The weather is getting a little bit warmer. We're going back and forth a little bit, but being outside in nature is one thing that definitely also helps as well. Connecting with people and making sure that, I think one thing for young people too, because they're such in the development of their identities, is being able to allow young people to explore who they want to be. Because I think a lot of times as adults, we try to control how we want them to develop instead of allowing them space to try to figure it out a little bit. And sometimes life is the best teacher. It's the best healer as well. They might bump their heads and they might discover this isn't the thing that I want to do. And now that they're learning and they're on a different path. So that'd be the answer.
Okay. Damon, do you have anything? on that? And maybe just in terms of your role, what would help you like directly in the work that you do?
Things we can implement. Some of the things that we can implement to really address mental health crises and mental health concerns in children are things that some of the schools are already trying to do, and that's your social emotional learning, diversity, equity, inclusion, things of that nature. These buzzwords that have become kind of boogeymen to some are ways that we can reach out to all of our students. Things that we can do that helps everyone, and getting, and like I said before, getting parents involved, making sure the parents understand that we are a team, we work together. I'm an expert on school psychology. That child's parents are an expert on that child, and I will never know the student as well as they do. So I have to work with them so we can come up with plans that work, and that's on a student by student basis. But it's also on a classroom, building, district, federal basis. We need to really start to understand our students and really teach them the ways to deal with stressors, deal with things that are tough, because they're going to go through tough things. We have to allow them to go through tough things. If we don't allow that, life's going to hit them super hard once they leave our houses.
Can you just describe just quickly maybe what social emotional learning looks like?
Well, in some ways, social emotional learning is really understanding the things that you go through as a student, as you're growing, as you're becoming an adult, as you become your own person, and how we talk about these things, how we deal with them, how we interact with one another, how we look out for each other, anti-bullying campaigns, things like that, or understanding that everybody's a little bit different and being okay with everybody being different, celebrating the differences between one another.
Okay, good, thanks. Anne?
Sure. I have a list. See, I told you I talked too much. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is I think we've created an environment where failure is not okay.
Right.
And that's really a problem. Many of you look like me. So do you remember the Joe Palooka punching bag? It was the punching, it's that silly thing that has sand in the bottle and you knock it down and it bounces back up. That's my image for resilience. Like, we have to help children know that they can fall down and get back up, and that that's okay. That failure isn't the end. It's the point is not that you failed. The point is that you got back up. So here are some ideas I have. The first is we have to support parents. Damien mentioned that involved parents have the best outcomes for their kids. Involved parents who are shamed do not have good outcomes.
Right.
So instead of judging parents, we have to encourage parents. Now, as an older person, I can already feel that's hard. I think, well, in my day, this is how we do it. Cut it. You say, how is it going? How is it working? How can I encourage? How can I support you? Is there anything I can do to help you? I think our parents are exhausted, and by extension, our teachers are exhausted, and our teachers who are parents are really exhausted. So we've got to find ways to support this generation who's doing the task of raising children in extraordinary ways and connected ways and simple ways. Number two, I think mental health is a community project. I love Brandon's idea. Every child does not need to go to therapy. Every child needs to be able to talk about things, to be able to connect with people. I think we should be doing, having more experiences of mastery and connection in the community.
Yep.
I would love to see internships for younger kids. I'd love to see internships for 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, 10 hours a week where they come and learn how to do something and feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
That would be such a gift to our community. The third is learning makes you feel better. That's the truth. Learning makes you feel better. And schools right now are under tremendous pressure to remediate loss. So teachers are feeling they've got to ram learning down kids' throats. And guess what's happening? The kids are gagging. They're refusing, they're shutting their mouths, they're shutting down. So we got to help schools and families feel comfortable with this idea of supporting motivation and enjoyment and creativity. You know, so much of what Brandon described as the media is it's prepackaged entertainment.
Right.
You just go numb to it. We got to help kids feel inventive. We got to have homework that is exciting. Can you imagine homework that's exciting? But we got to do it because we're losing more kids. Our anxiety to catch them up is actually backfiring. The fourth thing I want to speak to, and Brandon knows this and Damien does too, please remember in the community, children do not do things on purpose. We have a way of demonizing kids who are deviant or misbehaving. And we say, he did it on purpose. She did it on purpose, which means they're bad. Children do things for a purpose. And it's our job as adults to decode those purposes and give them something better to do. Many children learned maladaptive ways of managing these last few years, and they're stuck with those patterns. And our job is to help them learn new patterns, not to shame them. And lastly, we've got to provide some positive modeling for managing and mental health. TikTok is awash with videos about diagnoses. I have teenagers who come into my clinical practice and tell me they have this diagnosis and this diagnosis and this diagnosis, right? They've got it down. They are identifying with the mentally ill. That's their identity right now because it's what's on TikTok. And there's not as many messages of when you had this distress and you learned what to do about it. Dr. Cullen is here and she has a project that uses art with kids who are depressed to help them express themselves. That's mastery. So we've got to give them positive models of what you do when you're depressed and what you do when you're anxious. That you don't just have to crawl into a hole. You have to do something with it. And I think we can't lecture. I have a card in my office that I give out to parents very kindly. I say, this is my advice to you. I hope you'll appreciate it. The card says, stop talking. It's a good card. Remember Charlie Brown? Wow, 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 wow. It's not that. It's not about lecturing. It's about showing them, opening it up, asking them questions, giving them models, telling them our story so that they have some models of things working. Because right now, all our models are of things not working. And those videos are terribly destructive. Do you know there are online groups for how to cut?
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, this is a serious issue and it actually is hand in hand with one of our audience questions. It just seems like it's almost impossible to regulate what children, even young children, are able to see or get access to or take in. And one of our audience members is asking, can you help us understand the difference between sharing information that protects and information that frightens and causes anxiety in our children?
Oh, good question.
That's a great question.
Do you want to take that, Brandon?
Sure, I can take it. I think it's hard because how a young person interprets something, it's hard to control that. So what I would suggest is making sure that that young person knows that there's an avenue to talk to you about what they come across and that you set up an opportunity to have those conversations. So for example, I have a 9-year-old and she has access. I mean, she knows how to find anything. Even if I take the app off the iPad, she can still figure it out. So I make sure I'm not lying. So I make sure that she knows that there's always an opportunity to talk to me about anything. Actually, we just had an interesting conversation because she said, Dad, what is a lesbian? I was like, oh, here we are. And we talked about it. We talked about how when two women are into an intimate relationship, what does that mean? Now, she had kind of an idea, but she didn't really know, but she knew that Dad was somebody I can talk to about it. And she waited to have that conversation with me and not her mom, which was also interesting too. So it's, but just the fact that she knew that that was a conversation that we can have at 9 That's what's important. And our kids need to be able to know that they have access to adults that are willing to have those difficult, uncomfortable, and sometimes conversations that we would like to avoid.
That's a great answer. I love development. I love development. I love knowing that 2-year-olds are different than 5-year-olds, and 12-year-olds are really different than 14-year-olds. So I think we need also to help parents, and this is where schools and pediatricians are so important to help children parents keep perspective on their kids. We have a tendency to see our children as older than they are. And then we talk to them in ways that are bigger than they can manage. So Brandon modeled how you do it in pace and you watch your child's reaction. And I think that's where, again, the public health are.
Yeah.
I don't want to burden teachers with more responsibility, but our teachers, our pediatricians, our daycare centers, our community workers, we're all mental health workers if we're interested in how children develop.
I think one of the really interesting things about, this also comes into the media that children consume, and we're talking about TikTok and things like that. It goes all the way back to, your relationship with your children. There's a singer, his name is Jello Biafra. You've never heard of him. Anyways, he, on one of his talking tours, he was talking about, when parents take the music or take the movies or take the video games away from the children, it makes it that much more enticing. Like if you're listening to something that I don't like, and I just take it from you, all the kid is thinking is like, daddy's mean, daddy's unfair, daddy's a fascist. But a better way to deal with that is like, you like this. Why? And just have the conversation about what are you getting from this? Because trust me, my mom and dad were not thrilled with the fact that I had purchased a bunch of albums by the band Suicidal Tendencies. They were not thrilled at all. But we had the conversation. Why do you like this song? I saw your mommy and your mommy's dead. It's funny, mom. It's not, it's it's expression. And through that conversation, through that talking, through that being open, my parents worried less about what I was listening to because they knew that I still had a head on my shoulders.
They were interested.
Right.
Mhm.
Trust me, they still are not thrilled with the music I listen to and make. So, but they understand. They understand that this is what I listen to, this is what I'm consuming. And what they taught me when I was a child is still in here, it's still with me. They are much bigger influence on me than the gentleman in the band Megadeth.
That's
Thank
also
you.
such an interesting example because they looked at the function,
Right.
and they didn't get stuck on the form. And I think that's where parents are really getting frightened these days. They don't know how to look at the function.
Functionality. Yeah.
And I think sometimes parents think, oh, well, my kid would come to me or I'm easy to talk to. And sometimes maybe that's worth a check-in because maybe you're not, or, how do you build that trust? A lot of kids, I think, would be afraid to come to their parents with a lot. Hopefully that's changing. This question is for you, Damien, actually. Can you explain the process for identifying students in class who need support and psychological resources? And then it says, does the district have to pay for that? So I guess what if there aren't enough resources for them? What if they need out of school care? But let's maybe start with, how do you identify who really needs some help?
The identification typically comes from teachers. They'll notice something. They'll know something about the child. They'll bring it to perhaps the student assistance team, which is the team that looks at students, tries to develop interventions for academics or behavior. Sometimes it comes from the parent who has the concern. And a lot of time when I hear about a concern like that, myself or whoever the psychologist is for that building, we'll just go into the classroom and look and just observe and see what we're seeing. And then what we do is we compare that student to the other students. Is everybody going through something like this? If everybody's going through something like this, we put something together for the class, for the building. But if you have one student that's really having more trouble, then we start focusing on, okay, what's that looking like? How can I identify that in a way that is measurable and observable? And then once I look at it that way, what's the function of this behavior? What are they getting from doing this? Because every behavior has a function. Every behavior has a function. Just example, if a kid is stealing, intervention I put into place to stop them from, if the kid's stealing food because they're hungry, any intervention I put into place has to feed them. Because it can't be enough to say, okay, stop stealing food. How do we replace that? Okay, give them food and they'll stop stealing food. And so we need to find the function. We need to find what's happening. We need to try to feed that. And we need to get them the help they need if it becomes something more than that. But we have to look at it really logically and analytically and really compare them to their average student in that classroom.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, just really briefly. And I think it was 1976, the United States government passed Public Law 94-142 that funded special ed, or that mandated special ed services for children birth to 21, but they've never funded it. It's funded at a small percentage of what the costs are. So you should know that our schools are mandated to provide services they're not getting reimbursed for.
Brandon, did you have anything to add?
I do, but not for schools.
That's
One
okay.
of the things that I would say is what I call pay attention to the minis in the middle. Oftentimes, when it comes to mental health, we look at the children who either have developmental things or behavioral things, but we don't look at the students who are just kind of in the middle. They're doing all right. They're doing okay. And we kind of overlook them. And then when something happens, it's like, we never seen it coming. So, I always encourage parents to pay attention to any drastic changes that they've noticed in their child. Appetite, sleep, hygiene, interest. If these things shift and the shift just seems a little odd, that's usually your sign to pay attention to what's going on. Maybe ask some questions, get the young person out of their normal routine, try to see how they adjust to connecting with you. Because sometimes we just miss things. Because the kids' grades are good enough, they're engaging just enough and we miss what's going on.
Sure. Along the lines of just identifying different problems, this audience member says, as a physician, I often see parents with significant mental health issues attempting to raise children. You can see the cycle repeating itself. How do we break the cycle? I think one of you mentioned anxiety earlier on, or just mirroring parents' behaviors in general. Anne, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so, okay. So it's really important for me to say people with mental illness can parent, just as people with physical illness can parent. The number one requirement to help them parent is that they know their illness. And what makes mental health so challenging, especially chronic mental health, is that people have often learned to deny their illnesses or manage their illnesses and minimize their symptoms. So they're not aware of how it's affecting their children. Those of us who work in children's mental health know that we have an interesting point of entry, which is they want to do right by their children. So being able to help them know how their functioning and behavior affects their children is a gift. So you don't see your anxiety, but when you come in, I feel your anxiety, and I bet your child feels that anxiety too. How can I support you so that you can keep your anxiety contained so you can do the job you want to do with your child? Is the kind of conversation. Now, again, I want to be realistic. All of our systems are struggling. Most of our pediatricians have 12 minutes in a visit. Right? So to do this kind of supportive mental health work requires that they have more time. Yeah. And we need to find ways to allow our systems to do that. Right? In this effort to contain costs, we've really made things very expensive to real people who are suffering. But parents can parent, but they need help. And they need to know not their diagnosis, not you have this, so therefore, but this is how it shows up. When you're depressed, I have a very depressed mom now, and I'm working with her on when you're depressed. She has a lot of physical pain. We've created a chart, a temperature chart, and every day she puts how much pain she's in. She just puts it as a mark on the chart so that her 4 children know that if she's at a 9, she's probably not going to be able to do much. But if she's at a 2, she can do a lot more. And they're starting to learn that they can regulate because they understand it's about their mom. The thing about children is that when it doesn't get explained to them, they always blame themselves. So when they know mom is sick or dad is sick for whatever reason, mental health, physical health, and they know this is about me, this is about me, the parent, not about you, the child, then they have space to learn how to manage and master that. But when they're caught up in the confusion, they don't have space, and then they internalize it.
It's very good. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? Okay.
No.
Another question here, and I think alluding to something earlier about like unstructured time and, being outside. One audience member wondered, how do we manage children's need for risky or unstructured play with real concerns for safety, such as gun violence?
Yeah, it's a great
Do
question.
you want to take that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can start if you want,
Yeah,
Brandon.
I can take it. Yeah, you always have to err on the side of caution. You always have to make sure that safety is, something that you make sure your kids do have. So if there are communities that, children are playing in and they have rampant gun violence, those are definitely communities that you do have to think twice before just letting kids go out and have free play. But those communities also have spaces and places where kids can engage. Sometimes there are parks and sometimes the parks aren't that safe. So you might, for those parents, the encouragement might be to find those safer zones for their kids to play in. Maybe it's, it's behind the house instead of in front of the house. Maybe it's connecting with a few different neighbors so that the kids are playing together collectively. But I would say their strategy, no matter what community or neighborhood we're in, for kids to have some level of play, but also always erring on the side of caution in communities where gun violence is rampant.
This is the tragedy. I mean, again, the
Yeah.
car. How many of us would let our kids drive a car if we knew that they were going to crash? Nobody. So at some point, we have to take leaps. We have to realize this is their world. This is their lives. And we've got to give them space to experience that. So the caution is a very, very tricky idea.
Yeah.
How do we let our children go? Now, one of the things I think Brandon is right, we've got to develop a sense of community ownership. I remember
Right.
August Wilson, the playwright, used to talk about growing up in Pittsburgh, and he lived in a very coherent neighborhood. So even when his parent was not looking out for him, other people were. I go out in my neighborhood now, I don't know the children, right? We're not out enough. We're not mixing enough. Parents, 2-parent families are working, children aren't home enough. So I don't think to look at a child and say, oh, be careful on the bike, because I think, oh, it's not my kid. Maybe I need to change my mindset. Maybe we need to develop a community commitment, because we have to let children explore.
The funniest thing is that statistically, it's safer now than it was 80s, 90s, when I was out riding my bikes all across the city of Saginaw, Michigan. It's way safer now. Crime is way down from back then. Here's the difference, though. We didn't have several 24-hour news stations who needed our eyes glued on it, and to keep us frightened of everything. Yes, gun violence is a real problem. At the same time, it's been a problem for a long time. It just hasn't, had ad revenue behind it as much as it does now. I mean, I grew up in a city. I grew up in when my early years in a neighborhood there were gangs in the neighborhood. The guy who lived across the street was in a motorcycle gang. Great guy, Lloyd. I remember him. He's, but I didn't feel unsafe because I wasn't hearing about all this happening all the time, as if it's always happening. And every time I leave the house, I'm going to get taken and then murdered. That's, I do blame a lot of this fear and anxiety about letting the kids out to play on that always going news cycle. Right, raise your hand real quick if you remember that the world news and local news was all within 1 hour. From 6 till 7. And then, Cosby comes on. So yeah, it's a safer place. We just know more about it now.
And I think just along the lines, we have about 4 minutes left or so. And I think this is a good way to close it, just for anybody here who, may not experience kids and see kids that often. I went to Maple Grove Senior High School for a story recently, and I was like, you don't have paper? Like, I was just like, you just use tablets. And I thought, oh, I'm so removed from certain ages.
Yeah.
So that community ownership and that idea of getting involved, what can people do if your kids are all grown up, or if you don't have kids, or how can every person get involved and make sure that we're helping our next generations? Do you want to start, Ann?
I do. Money. Money. Agencies need money. Schools need money. Programs need money.
Fair enough. Okay. Moving on.
I would say be a part of the school community. Be, and I'm just speaking from the schools now, but as parents or as grandparents or as community members, be a part of the school community. And I'll tell you, if you're a parent, dropping into the school, that'll keep your kids' behavior tip top.
Yeah, that is true. But before Ann said money, Ann actually answered this question earlier when she said, well, she actually answered it twice. She said role modeling behaviors and creating internships. Now, I would extend internships and call them apprenticeships, because young people don't know how to do adult things. And then we have adult expectations for them to do things. And sometimes they have arrested emotional development to do those adult things. So what I'm saying here is create opportunities for young people to get engaged in things, even if it's something small, opportunities. Now, money may be attached to that, right? If we pay them to get engaged and do some things, but the opportunity during the summer to come and shadow a job. I remember Take Your Daughter to Work Day. Does that even happen anymore?
Virtual.
Yeah, it's virtual. Come on, come
It's
sit
on
next to
Zoom.
me during this Zoom meeting that we're on here. But there are opportunities to bring young people into things, even if it's for a short time period, so they can just be exposed to something different. Because right now their exposure is just virtual, right? They can get access to whatever they want. But how do we start inviting them into the things that operate life so that they do see themselves in these spaces? A lot of conversations that I have are about representation. We need more of this. We need more of that. That's true. But we just need people to see just things in general. Like my 7-year-old wants to be an astronaut. Like that's her thing, because she's seen, I forgot what the movie was called, but the one with the 3 black hidden figures. She's seen that and said, Dad, I want to be an astronaut. She hasn't let it go since she's seen the movie. So guess what I've been on a hunt to do? Find astronauts to be around my daughter and say, hey, here, let's meet this person. I found one actual rocket scientist that I knew. I went to school with her and I said, hey, it was on Zoom because she's in Virginia. I said, hey, can you hop on this Zoom with me real quick and just introduce yourself to my daughter? Lit up her day because she's seen herself, because she can be that. And I said, whenever you're in Minnesota, let me know so I can bring you and have lunch with you and my daughter so you can tell her all about being a rocket scientist. We need to make sure that we're introducing opportunities for our kids to see things. And it's okay to put them to work. Thank you.
Let's call them practice jobs.
Practice jobs, yeah.
Practice jobs.
Yeah, those are all really great ideas. Can we just have another round of applause for our panel? Ann Garrity, Damian Smith, and Brandon Jones, thank you so much for the work that you do and for sharing your thoughts at the Rotary Sunrise Forum. And thank you to our audience members for your wonderful questions. This is a long way to go here and a lot to explore, but it certainly helps to learn from you all and to have discussions like this as a community. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you all.